The pharmaceutical industry is a complex and fascinating field. It takes countless of people to bring a high-quality product to the market. In the Qualitox podcast, I bring to you leaders, experts, and innovators who will share their experiences and explain to us how they do it. Welcome to the Qualitox podcast. I'm Jan Kugel, your host, and my guest today is Jenny Kussauer. Jenny, because you're here, I'll let you introduce yourself shortly before we start with the podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jan. Thanks for having me and for the invite. So, hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Kussauer, as Jan already stated. I'm an international GXP consultant and auditor. And I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 20 years now. So half of that I spent within the clinical research sector, and the other half I spent within QA, multiple sectors of QA, meaning GMP, GDP, largely GVP, and also GCP. So probably I spent the last 10 to 12 years auditing. But not only auditing, also helping companies develop or implement their quality management systems as a consultant.
So we are going to talk today a lot about being an auditor, about audits in general, how to implement a good auditing system, and in general, how to succeed in the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that this episode will be quite great for students who want to find their way into the pharmaceutical industry, or for everybody who seeks to succeed in this industry where you have so many different positions that you can choose from, but there are some specific rules that you need to follow to really succeed. And Jenny here did all that, and she will help us understand what should people do to reach good success in the industry. Jenny, it's really cool talking to you. So first, thank you for coming, and it was a pleasure working with you. So I got to know you during work, and I found your way of consulting really great, because you listen, you go to all the departments, you listen to people, you don't just come with prepared SOPs, but you really do everything custom made. And again, you listen a lot. We did a few tours together through the plants and audits, and I see how well you know your field, and the amazing thing how you came to those positions. And what's special about your road is that it didn't start in natural sciences studies. You actually studied the communication, and you found your way to the CRO and the clinical research, and then to the pharma industry, and then to really high-level position in the pharma industry. And you did it in Germany, which is amazing by itself, because as I know it, when I immigrated to Germany, I had also learned a lot about how everything here is different, and how your titles and the things that you learn important here. And it's very difficult for people without the right course of study, and people without a PhD even, to reach such high positions as you. And it would be really great to hear your advice. So how did you do it?
So first, thank you for the introduction, Jan. First of all, I think for me it was fairly easy, because I had a student's job at the time, and I got into that very small CRO where I started as a data manager. So at the time, we were just in the implementation phase of eCRFs. We had paper CRFs at the time, and so eCRFs was still in its infancies, and so everything had to go through paper, and there was a lot of paperwork that needed to be done. So a few students were actually working in the data management sector at the time, and I found that so interesting, and that I spent every hour I could in that company, and it was as it was natural for me to learn at the time because I was still studying. I was picking that up very easily, and I developed a lot of skills while I was there. And I learned how to look at things very specifically in a scientific way, because you're doing that anyway when you go to university. You need to be able to work scientifically.
So it was still easy to get this student job, although you were not from biology, chemistry, pharmacy. They still they just wanted somebody who does some paperwork.
Yeah, they wanted some data management. They wanted actually fairly simple. They wanted the data on the paper entered into a system on the PC. That was it. That's how it started, basically. As simple as that. And that's more than 20 years ago now. So you didn't need any degree at the time. Yeah.
Even you didn't have the degree, but you were in the right place, in the right time, and you could impress the right people, probably.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably how it went. Because when I started there, it quickly developed into something else. I was not only the data manager. I soon started to have some interest in the programming parts of the eCRFs, like I said, that were in the development phase at the time.
Can you explain the definition?
Yes, electronic case report form, for those who don't know that. A case report form is actually a form where you document during a clinical trial patient and subject data that needs to be captured during a clinical trial.
Mm-hmm. So back then it was all paper, and it was the time it was starting to get digitalized.
Yeah.
And they just wanted somebody that does some copy-paste work.
Yeah, more or less. Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah.
Okay, but then you could... you've seen that's how interesting it is, and you wanted to develop yourself in this direction.
No, not at all. It just happened. So...
Nobody asked you.
No, actually no, because I was spending every minute there anyway. I soon started to get into other areas and topics of work. And the beauty of working within very small companies is that you get to see a lot of other areas also. Yeah? So you don't tend to stay in your niche, more or less. You get the opportunity to see other areas also. And because there was opportunity at the time, I could also go into a little bit of statistical analysis, for example, and then even move into the mother or sister company at the time to work as a CRA.
And at what point did you decide to transfer from clinical research to pharma manufacturing?
Pharma manufacturing, that came later at a stage.
What was the next stage?
The next stage actually was moving from a small to a bigger CRO, and from CRO into pharmaceutical or manufacturing business. And
you started directly with auditing positions?
I did because I had the auditing, already gathered auditing experience within the CRO. I was working for Quintiles at the time. It was one of the biggest CROs, and they had a very good education programs for young auditors at the time. So that's where I learned all my auditing skills, basically.
So it's a huge advantage sometimes to start in smaller companies because you do a lot. In smaller companies, one QA department of 3 people does everything, while in a big company there is a QA person for a QA team for each small section. So they have dozens, hundreds of people that each does a really small part. And it's much difficult to learn, I find, in such situations, because in order to learn a lot of stuff, you need to move from one position to another, but it's usually uncommon. It's easier sometimes to get to the bigger companies because they know that they can train the people and they stay there, but sometimes for the sake of the career, it's better to look maybe for a smaller company.
Exactly, yeah. I can very much relate to that because, like I said previously, working for or within a small company, there is really the beauty that you're given the opportunity to work in many different areas, because as a simple fact, they just don't have the capacities, they don't have the resources so that they can say, okay, within the quality assurance sector, you're only responsible for the CAPA management. No, it's not possible. You don't have the resources. You have to do deviations. You have to do the risk analyses on top and whatnot. And sometimes you, even if you don't have the expertise, you get thrown into it, and then you got to grow with it. And that's you learn. Sometimes you learn the hard way, but that's not the worst way to do it, actually. That's how you gather your experience at the end of the day. It's nothing bad about starting in a huge pharmaceutical company. Not at all. You just got to be aware that sometimes you stay within your niche.
Yeah, you need to decide. Many people just do their job and they fail to learn about what the other departments do. Because when I worked in the QA, I found that many people think that they just come with the work and they just come with additional work for the people. They come as the police, they just find what's wrong, but actually they sit and do nothing, and they have no idea. So I always, when I came to people and say, do you want to make an appointment where I tell you about what we are doing, and everyone was always excited about hearing what is being done in the department. And I know that many companies, as part of their training, they send people to different departments to learn about what they actually do there. But sometimes it's maybe too early. For example, if you just start in pharma, it could be overwhelming to understand the whole process in a huge company. Because if you have a small company with one or two products, you can easily grasp it. But if you have a company where you have 10 products and you have a huge site with 50 buildings, and just to learn to understand what each department does can be quite overwhelming, and that's a negative part of the huge companies. But other than that, if you do the right choices and decide to develop yourself, and you come to your manager and say, okay, I want to do this, that, and I want to maybe to switch to other positions, and maybe go see what other departments do. It's always possible. And what's good in big companies, there are people who work there for 20, 30 years, and they're so experienced, and they know the processes like the back of their hands. And if they find the time to talk to you, and hopefully they do, because I learned that sometimes there are people who are really busy, but you should really approach people and ask them to learn about what they're doing, because it really helps to understand the whole process. If you don't do it, you cannot really build yourself in positions like being an auditor.
Right. Yeah. Specifically, when you want to become an auditor, you have to have a really broad scope of expertise. It makes sense to have that. You don't have to have it. Let's put it that way. So the more the more you have had insight in the past into how the whole manufacturing process works until the final product actually leaves the storage place and is being trucked to, I don't know where in the world. So you need to understand the full process. How does that actually work? Who is involved? Which departments? How many people have their hands on the product, for example?
So we talked about it before the podcast. We actually talked about my previous podcast with Alex Hall about the qualified person role. And you watched it and you said that you found so many similarities between being a qualified person and being a GXP auditor.
Yeah, exactly. Probably a lot of things were actually ringing a bell with me. But she said, you got to stay curious all the time as a QP. You got to be open. You got to be flexible. That's all of the usual traits that you have to have as an auditor also. Yeah. You got to know your stuff. You got to sometimes you just act as a consultant. That's actually what is also considered to be your job. People approach you with questions. Sometimes you don't have the answer, but people have the answers themselves, and you just guide them through the audit, for example. And there's a lot of similarities actually. Of course, auditors are not accountable at the end of the day. That's probably the biggest difference. Which is good. Yeah, we're just showing people where is non-compliance, for example, or where's flaws, or where's room for improvement.
Well, I guess that many QPs also do a lot of auditing to understand really what's going on in the pharma. But also as a GXP auditor, what comes a lot is knowing probably a lot of different standards other than GMP.
Right.
Because as an auditor, you go to audit a lot of suppliers that are not GMP. And I found it quite difficult at first to differentiate from GMP to ISO.
Right.
Because when you're always working in GMP, you're used to the highest standard. And when you go to a manufacturer that does filling or produces some raw materials which are not under GMP but under ISO, suddenly everything looks wrong, although it is not. And then it's the most difficult part to know how to switch yourself from standard to standard.
Right. Okay. I think probably the biggest switch is actually, as you said, from GMP to ISO, because ISO, you see, actually, GMP was built actually from ISO when it comes to its content. But of course, GMP is much more specific. There is much more of documentation that needs to be produced that ISO actually doesn't require. For ISO, is client relationships and all of that. That is in the focus of
so it's
the standard.
So the happiness and the satisfaction of the client, but by the pharma you don't care about satisfaction, you care about the safety of the client. So the patient may take the drug, he may not be satisfied with some of the results, but it still saves his life because of the quality of it. It may have some additional negative effect, and but the point of the pharma is that the drug does what it's supposed to do.
And in a safe way.
In a safe way. So it's not about maybe the color or the taste. In the end of the day, the safety comes first.
Correct. The patient doesn't care about the color of the tablet. You say, as long as that tablet is going to do what it's supposed to do. Before
GMP, taking a pill, it was actually like a Russian roulette. You have no idea what you're taking. It may kill you, it may not, because you have no idea. So we're going a big back. It's really interesting for me. You came with no natural sciences background. So the interesting part is, what are the challenges that you may have encountered in your pharmaceutical career?
Well, actually, to be pretty honest, it didn't make a difference. So you got to know your standards. That's A. So everyone can get into the standards and really get the content of them and what it means to have that implemented. And B, as an auditor, you don't have to be the expert. Yeah. So of course, all those people sitting in the manufacturing place or wherever else you're auditing, they're the experts, and they need to justify the process. They need to justify their methods they used. They need to be able to prove that what they have done comes from a scientific background. So if they prove to me that that's fine, I'm completely happy with that. I don't need a scientific background. Of course, it helps if you have a chemistry background, for example, or a pharmaceutical background, or even a medical background. That even helps a lot. But at the end of the day, it all comes through experience. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And talking to the right people and being in the right places to work operationally and learn from scratch.
Yeah. that's what I find the best, as you said, the experience. So what I found good for me is really starting in the laboratory and understanding it from the bottom from the bottom up, and that's why I like to talk to all the people in all the departments in the logistics and the manufacturing, because each one has something to share and they have amazing expertise, each of the people, and it really helps talking and asking questions and learning. And actually I find personally, so I come from a scientific background, but if I think about what in the QA position, what really did it contribute me, I'm not sure. So okay, when I understand so I worked in I did QA for a biotechnological product, and as a biotechnologist I understand what it does, I understand the production phase. But for supplier management, what I mostly did in the QA, you can easily do without. So it's maybe more interesting because you understand, but do we need it? No.
No. And on top of that, with it doesn't matter where you start with a new job. You have to learn the processes within that specific company from scratch anyway. So you see, they might be completely different as what you were used to. And even if you're coming directly from university, you're learning the things from scratch, and you're doing that very easily, and you're doing that very fast most of the time. So no matter where you go, of course, if you bring that background, of course that helps. But usually you have to learn those processes and methods and whatever is used there, SOPs, from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it doesn't matter also how long you work in a company. If you, it doesn't matter if you work 20 years. If you come to a new company, to a GMP position, you will still spend about half a year on official training. And you must do it. You must show that you learn the processes in the company. Jenny, thank you very much for your insights. It was a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you for tuning in. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of the QualiTalks podcast. If you did, consider subscribing so you don't miss any more episodes. Stay compliant and see you in the next one.